You've seen the full endings of Dredge, and you're kind of sitting there scratching your head thinking, well, what exactly did happen there? Now, the best way to kind of put together a lot of these pieces is actually if you take a look at a lot of these notes and bottles, and also to talk to some of the residences all throughout the entire game, as they start to fill you in as to what might have happened before the fisherman decided to lose his memory. Obviously, this is going to be a very full spoilered video for Dredge, so just keep that in mind because, well, the whole point of this video is we're going to unpack what exactly did happen before the fisherman's memory was erased and before those ancient evils were really unleashed into the greater region. Alright, so let's start at the very beginning of things where, according to the tattered receipt, the fisherman bought a very expensive necklace full of emeralds with a custom engraving for Jay, my shining star, for his soon-to-be wife back in December of 1926. Then by March of 1927, the following year, the fisherman proposed to his girlfriend, and with a very sparkly ring, of course, and of course she did also say yes as well. Then by June of that year, the fisherman's mom unfortunately did pass away, and so the couple inherited the estate. Yeah, that one on Blackstone Isle, where the collector hangs out with the nice fancy castle. It's honestly a pretty good, well put together place. In his mother's will, however, she gifted the fisherman's wife her pocket watch, which the fisherman's wife wasn't really too fond of, but decided to take it out of obligation, but still important that the pocket watch was given to his wife. And okay, so this is where things start to get a little bit strange, because on the 20th of August, Jay points out that fishing has been poor, and the fisherman does a renaming ritual, calling the boat Julie, something he takes very seriously, which involves throwing out everything from the old boat in order to just kind of have this whole thing done completely. In this whole kerfuffle and renaming ritual, Jay actually holds onto a keychain actually, of the old boat's name, which was called Ocean's Riches. Now at this point, I'm going to assume he named the boat after his wife, given the previous engravings with the whole J thing going on, and so we're going to just call his wife Julie from this point forward in the video. Now the very next day, a rock actually pops out of nowhere and does damage to the boat, nothing really significant, but still is kind of noteworthy, similar to actually what happens when you start to go a little bit crazy in the game. But the fisherman's response to this is actually just to meticulously check through all the steps that happen on the renaming ritual, just to make sure that everything did happen properly, which is kind of a little strange. So I think that this was actually the point where the fisherman started to get tied up in the Eldritch-based activities. Given that fishing wasn't going fantastic, and also too that his mom had passed away, that does give a couple of motives here for the fisherman to start to dwell in the supernatural. Whether or not it was to increase the profits or potentially bring someone back from the grave, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to say that the renaming ritual was probably some sort of ritual to do either one of these things, and obviously it did have a couple of consequences because it wasn't done properly, as Julie did take something along from the boat, not fully just dismantling the original vessel. Okay, so now we move to September 9th, where the fisherman has completely kept his wife out of all fishing activities, keeping her at home. And of course, this is when he is going to install the dredge on his actual boat and start pulling treasures up from the deep, which is honestly kind of a little bit of suspicious timing, if you ask me. And then this is where shit hits the fan. On September 14th, Julie reports being afflicted by a strange chill which fogs her brain. And this comes right after she was aboard the ship, where she witnesses the fisherman pull up an old wooden casket. And upon opening the box, having a crimson book fall out onto the deck, she writes that he stared down into the open casket, then turned to me. In his eyes, I saw the void. And the note ends very abruptly. Now we can start to piece together what really did happen here if we take a look at the old mare's dialogue, which is unlocked in the true ending. And basically we learned that the ship was sunk on the spot shortly after that chest was opened, and the entire crew were washed up on the beach. The fisherman, though, kept the book in his possession while everyone else pleaded for him to throw the book back, only for the fog to roll into the harbor the same day. Interestingly enough as well, the fisherman's wife was nowhere to be found in that wreckage. So, from unleashing the fog into the bay, this is probably where all the monsters and horrors appeared from, making their way into each of the 4 biomes and creating all sorts of the monstrosities that can be seen lurking around at night just in the general ocean, like that stupid giant oarfish that is going to try and... it looks like it's a boat, but then it eats you up halfway through. So this is the turning point, where the fisherman decides to try and complete a ritual, namely one that would bring his wife back from the ocean, and he just needs to collect the right materials to perform the ritual correctly this time. If we take a look at the artifact manifest note, we start to see that quite a few of these items were collected on a boat called the SY Grand Prize by an owner, Mr. Michael Schultz, which I'm going to theorize is actually the name of our fisherman. On this artifact manifest, we see that Mr. Schultz had gotten his hands on an oaken music box with J carved on the bottom that was rescued from an undisclosed shipwreck. Likely the one that was originally on his boat, and that was probably his wife's music box. He also had a wooden mask which is said to bring protection of evil spirits, which was traded for a pair of socks and a pocket watch chain, likely to be the same pocket watch that Julie was given from his mom in his mom's will. We also see in the fisherman's notes that he was aware that the casket seal is the core of the fog, and in the ragged note it's clear that the paranoia is starting to take over and make him question whether his intentions are good or not. It's a bit confusing based on the way that it's written out, since it sounds like an internal dialogue, but let's remember that the collector and the fisherman are two identities living in the same person. So I don't think it's too far off to think that the fisherman might have been losing his sanity and writing against himself as he kind of went between these two personas. But we know from the collector that the fisherman did decide to have his memory erased. And I think what really set him over the edge was finding the last remaining notes left by Julie, despite her already being gone. So there are two notes that can be found without dates written on them, and they're in the tone of Julie. It feels like it continues the story, so I'm very confident in saying that these notes are written by Julie. It's clear, however, that she's kind of being corrupted by whatever eldritch horror lies under the ocean. The first one starts off and she seems really calm, but then violently writes he must return and says she will write him another letter, with a lot of angrily smudging out some of the text in between. In the next letter, she tells him that she almost feels whole again, and the last thing he needs to do is throw me back. Okay, now this is where we get into speculation territory, because I initially assumed that this is in reference to the Crimson Book, that she is now one with the book and wants the book to be tossed back into the ocean, thus saving humanity, which is pretty noble of her, all things considered. But when you read this in conjunction with the first note where she is angrily demanding that he returns, and also keep in mind, the artifacts that are tossed in the bad ending are all directly related to Julie. And so as soon as you take that into mind, it actually takes on a little bit of a different meaning. What I think is going on here is this is her wanting the fisherman to help her escape again. But at this point, she's kind of merged with whatever eldritch horror is lurking at the bottom of the ocean. And so, well, if she is released from the ocean, then that's going to release the giant monster as well. Now, flash back to the fisherman probably seeing these notes. And well, you can imagine that this is probably enough to really shake his resolve. As his paranoia was already increasing, this is the point where the fisherman decided to just use the Crimson Book to erase his memory, trying to leave the past behind, understanding that the Julie that was lost to the ocean is not the same person anymore, and she's just completely gone off the deep end. Pun intended. He also likely sank his boat with all of the different artifacts on it, hoping that the artifacts would be scattered all over the bay, and that way no one could come back and complete the ritual as well, assuming that he held on to the Crimson Book. But of course, the Crimson Book isn't going to let him get away that easily. And this is when the collector's persona manifested to try and get the fisherman to complete the ritual regardless. And, well, this is where the story starts for Dredge. And now you can understand why the lighthouse keeper gave you the cold shoulder initially. She saw what you did on that day and was the only one not to be driven insane by her actions before the game even started. Anyways, that's kind of what I was able to put together, trying to piece together some of the story elements to really understand what did happen beforehand. Would be curious to think what you guys think of this as well. There's a lot of speculation kind of going on here, but I think that given all of the evidence that you can kind of collect throughout the game and all the interactions that you do have with all the individuals, to me this feels like it makes the most sense. Let me know if you agree or disagree down in the comments below, and if you thought this was an interesting video, then please like. I'm going for a little bit of a different format on these videos, so hopefully you guys do enjoy it. And subscribe for more actually too. That would be fantastic to let me know that this is something that I should continue doing, because, you know, this is a little bit different than video game guides and allows me to kind of stretch the brain a little bit to try and work on a little bit more lore, which is always very fascinating for me. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will catch you in the next video. Until then, well, we'll see you later, and don't fish out any paranoia books out of the ocean. If we've learned anything from Dredge, it's a bad idea.